You stole my precious Chris, so you deserve to suffer.
Every Christmas, when we visit Chris's family home, his mother, Diane, who obsessively dotes on him, works me to the bone like a maid. The tradition for Christmas dinner in this house is steak, but the premium meat never makes it to my plate. I've endured this petty and vindictive harassment for 5 long years. I'm done trying to be the good daughter-in-law. Just as I was resigning myself to the situation, an unexpected ally appeared. An elderly woman with silver hair, armed with British-style empowerment, decisively cut through Diane's bullying and gave me a much-needed boost. She turned out to be the grandmother of this household. My name is Laura, a 33-year-old stay-at-home wife. I left a prestigious corporation when I got married. It's been 5 years now, and I started thinking it's time to have kids. But my husband, Chris, seems relaxed, saying, "It'll happen eventually." He doesn't seem to care about my desire to start fertility treatments. Our relationship isn't particularly good or bad. Nothing out of the ordinary. After 5 years together, the honeymoon phase feels like a distant memory. One day, we decided to go on a trip. Just the two of us, for the first time in a long while. We went back to a cozy cottage surrounded by nature, a place we had visited when we first started dating. Somewhere in my heart, I hoped it might rekindle that newlywed feeling. After relaxing at the cottage and unwinding from daily life, we decided to check out a local event. There, I unexpectedly ran into my college friend. When she noticed me, her face lit up with a big smile, and she came over. "It's been so long. How have you been?" I learned that she's been married for 2 years and already has 2 kids, which made me feel a little envious. As I listened to her talk, I could vividly sense the joys and challenges of having children. That night, I told Chris about running into my friend. I was surprised to hear she has 2 kids. "Don't you think it's about time for us too?" As I began to speak, Chris, looking a bit exasperated, said,
Can we not talk about this again?
His words and attitude deeply shocked me. Every Christmas, Chris's family hosts a gathering at his parents' house, and for me, it's a real test of endurance. Chris has 2 older sisters, Sarah and Megan, who both live near his parents, but their husbands have never once attended these family gatherings. I suppose they want to avoid the awkwardness of spending time at their wives' family home, and honestly, I think they've got the right idea. I don't really want to go either.
Everyone's coming, so help mom out, okay?
But Chris wouldn't take no for an answer. When he asks, it's hard to turn him down. At first, I thought I'd only be helping out a little, but the reality was completely different. The first thing to greet me at Chris's parents' house is the piercing gaze of his mom, Diane.
Good morning. Thanks for helping us again this year.
As she says this, Diane's eyes seem to scrutinize my every move, like a reptile watching its prey.
"You're late. Put on an apron right now."
Sarah snaps, while Megan hands me a massive pile of vegetables.
Cut all of this.
Megan says, leaving me frozen in fear. Before me stands a mountain of vegetables so overwhelming that even a professional chef might give up. Sweating profusely, I grip the knife and work as fast as I can, only for Diane to suddenly take my hand from behind.
That's not how you cut it.
In that moment, a wave of tension washes over me, as if I've been doused in cold water. Meanwhile, Chris is in the living room, laughing and chatting happily with relatives over drinks. Good grief, Chris. I grumble to myself internally, but stopping isn't an option. When I finally finish cutting the vegetables, Diane promptly assigns me another task. Eventually, the Christmas feast begins. This place of trials will remain an unavoidable battlefield for me every year. This Christmas was bound to be the same. And as expected, it was no exception this time either. As soon as we arrived at Chris's parents' house, Diane asked me to help with the cooking, handed me an apron, and sent me straight to the kitchen. Meanwhile, Sarah and Megan were lounging in the living room, chatting and watching TV, making me feel like I was their maid. When the cooking was finally done, and I thought I could take a break, Diane casually said,
We're out of coffee beans. Could you go buy some?
While I was out getting the coffee beans, I imagined the house filled with the laughter of relatives. When I returned, they told me they were hungry and asked me to make something else, sending me back into the kitchen. While I was cooking, the kids were running around and spilled their drinks.
Why weren't you watching the kids?
Sarah snapped, glaring at me. How am I supposed to watch the kids while I'm cooking? And what are they doing, relaxing with wine in hand? On top of that, other relatives started giving me orders as if it were the most natural thing. They ordered me around, do this, do that, without a single word of gratitude, and looked at me coldly as they said this.
Useless.
I felt my spirit breaking. The hardest part, however, was dinner. In this house, Christmas dinner always features high-end beefsteaks every year. Each person gets exactly 3.5 ounces, carefully portioned onto small plates. The amount of meat ordered from the butcher is calculated by multiplying 3.5 ounces by the number of family members and relatives. But since I'm not a blood relative, I'm excluded from the count. Despite running around all day and taking care of everyone, I haven't had a single bite of steak in 5 years.
If you don't work, you don't eat.
Sarah and Megan quipped sarcastically.
Such a shame.
Diane said as she deliberately handed me a cup of weak coffee. I can't believe I've endured this for 5 years. But I've reached my limit. This Christmas, the steak preparations were underway as usual. I set the table by myself, cooked the food, and prepared the drinks. Sarah and Megan were laughing in front of the TV, while Diane chatted with the relatives. I glanced out from the kitchen to the living room and sighed. I've had enough. A year ago, I decided that no matter what Chris said, I wouldn't attend the family gathering next Christmas. However, as fate would have it, Chris's late father's mother, Grace, is apparently coming to the next Christmas gathering. Grace is 90 years old, but she's so spry and sharp that she looks like she's in her 70s. She lives abroad and only returns to the US once every few years. I hadn't seen her since our wedding. Thinking it would be bad to miss such an occasion, I reluctantly agreed to go. Determined that this would be the last time, I braced myself and prepared for the ordeal. Finally, the day arrived.
Laura, could you grab some drinks from the fridge?
Hey, my kid dropped the cake. Could you clean it up quickly?
Isn't the snack portion a bit small? Could you bring out something more filling?
Diane, Sarah, and Megan kept piling on requests, one after another, Then came the final blow from Chris.
Hey, mom's getting older, so why don't you clean the bathroom for her? Make it spotless while you're at it. Oh, and bring me another drink.
As I scrambled around, fulfilling all these demands, I was darting back and forth, yet not a single person besides me lifted a finger. They just sat there eating, drinking, and chatting. Chris, Diane, Sarah, Megan, and even the relatives were lounging comfortably while I was being worked to the bone. I was growing increasingly frustrated. I was just about ready to throw everything aside and leave when Grace finally arrived.
Hello, everyone. It's been so long.
The atmosphere instantly brightened as Grace walked in.
Grace, how have you been?
Everyone greeted her enthusiastically, and the drinks flowed even more freely. I completely missed my chance to leave, so I reminded myself that this would be the last time, let out a sigh, and went back to work. While preparing snacks in the kitchen, Grace suddenly approached me with a concerned look.
Are you okay? You seem so busy doing everything by yourself.
It was the first time anyone in this house had shown concern for me. I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat. It's fine. As long as everyone's enjoying themselves, that's enough for me.
But this isn't something one person should handle alone.
Grace said that and was about to say something to Diane, Sarah, and Megan, but I hurriedly stopped her. After all, this was going to be my last time, so I didn't mind clashing with Diane and the others at this point. However, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving a rift between Grace and her family. Really, it's okay. Grace, please don't worry about me and enjoy yourself.
If anything comes up, don't hesitate to let me know.
With those words, Grace returned to the group. As I watched her, I couldn't help but think that her years of living abroad must have given her a different perspective from the rest of this family. I wish I could have heard those words from Chris. My chest ached painfully. Before I realized it, I had unconsciously clenched my fists tightly. Just then, Diane walked over. Bracing myself for yet another task, I saw Diane pull out her phone and start talking. It seemed she was confirming an order with her favorite upscale butcher.
As usual, please deliver around 6 p.m. and make sure it's the right amount for the head count.
The word head count made my body reflexively tense. They're probably not counting me again. Not that I expect anything at this point. It's just the way things are. Even so, deep down, I wish I could leave if I wasn't going to be included. As I found myself staring at Diane, our eyes suddenly met. Diane smirked and said,
I'm really looking forward to the steak again this year. You like the meat from there too, don't you, Laura?
Knowing full well I'd never had any, Diane made the comment with intentional malice. Barely holding back, I forced an awkward smile and replied, I wouldn't know since I've never had it. I stopped myself from saying anything more, afraid that my pent-up feelings toward Diane might spill out.
Oh, you've never had it. That's such a shame. Well, there's some for you this time.
Diane said with exaggerated surprise, patting my shoulder repeatedly. In that moment, I had a sudden urge to throw a hot drink in her heavily made-up face, but I held back. No, I can't stoop to Diane's level if I do. I'll only lower my own dignity. I desperately told myself this in my heart and held back. Diane smirked, looking even more pleased with herself, as if encouraged by my restraint.
You know, since you stole my precious Chris, It's only fair you have to endure a little hardship.
Diane's words left me frozen in place. Did she just say that? Did I hear her right? I replayed her words in my mind. So all her meanness, all her spiteful actions have been deliberate? If that's true, I can't forgive this. While I stewed in my thoughts, the butcher arrived with the premium steaks. Frustrated but unable to stop myself, I began preparing the steaks. As per tradition, the meat was carefully portioned onto small plates, one serving per person. Even Sarah and Megan's 3 children received equal portions of steak. Naturally, or perhaps predictably, there was no steak on my plate. Of course. I glanced at Chris sitting next to me.
Does Laura not have any steak?
It was painfully obvious. Chris, Sarah, Megan, and even Diane all knew her actions were meant to exclude me, yet none of them seemed to care.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have made a mistake with the head count and forgot to include Grace coming back.
Diane put on the most blatantly fake performance I had ever seen. Liar, you were the one most concerned about Grace's arrival. I glanced around at the relatives, but no one said a word. It seemed everyone knew how obsessively Diane doted on Chris, to an almost unhealthy degree. At that moment, Grace, who had stepped out to take a work call, returned and took her seat, and everyone began eating all at once. So, how should I vent this boiling rage in my chest? I thought to myself as I sipped my hot coffee. Grace noticed and looked at me curiously.
Wait, Laura, aren't you eating?
Of course, she'd be surprised. There was no plate for me. It's only natural she'd find that odd. The fact that no one else cared only showed how bizarre this family was. I won't have it, I answered casually, sipping more coffee as though it were no big deal.
Why?
Grace looked shocked and turned to Diane. Diane put on a flustered expression and said,
Well, you see, I completely forgot about Grace coming back, and I only ordered the usual number of portions.
That's a lie. I finished my coffee and poured myself another cup.
I'm sorry about that. Here, have my portion.
I froze in surprise. I never expected Grace to say that. And I wasn't the only one stunned.
Oh no, you mustn't. It's been a while since you've had tender American beef, hasn't it? Please enjoy it. This is the finest quality you won't find overseas.
But Laura's been running around doing everything. She should be the one eating it.
As the daughter-in-law, it's only natural to help out when she's here.
Diane is flustered. Natural because I'm the daughter-in-law? Really? The instant my gaze hardened, the table jolted violently, nearly knocking over the drinks. Diane instantly fell silent, and an eerie stillness descended on the room.
Grace.
Chris's startled voice echoed through the now silent room. Grace had slammed her hands on the table with all her might. Diane and the other relatives stared at her in fear and astonishment.
What does being a daughter-in-law have to do with anything?
What?
Diane let out a strange sound, startled by Grace's deeply menacing voice. Grace then glared up at Diane with an intense, piercing gaze.
What does being a daughter-in-law have to do with not getting any steak?
Well, that's...
Does being a daughter-in-law mean she's not entitled to eat steak?
Grace stood up with such force it seemed she might slam the table again. Diane let out a strange noise and recoiled.
Don't be ridiculous. That's absurdly outdated thinking. This is nothing but bullying your daughter-in-law.
Under Grace's overwhelming force, Diane nearly collapsed in shock. The relatives turned pale, and the children were on the verge of tears. Grace continued.
Are you harassing her just because she's the daughter-in-law of this family?
No, of course not.
What about the rest of you?
Grace shifted her piercing gaze from Diane to Sarah and Megan. The fiery anger in her eyes made Sarah and Megan gulp audibly.
Don't tell me this treatment has been going on for years?
As they stayed silent, Grace turned to me and asked directly. I had no reason to stay quiet or lie, so I nodded.
Hey, Laura.
Diane exclaimed in a panic, but I ignored her and told the truth. Yes, for the past 5 years since I got married, every time I attend a family gathering, I'm worked like a maid from morning until night. I've never once tasted the premium steak everyone enjoys. Diane always says, "Oh, I forgot," while intentionally eating the steak right in front of everyone. Grace turned back to Chris, fixing him with a sharp look.
Is that true?
Chris, his face pale, reluctantly nodded.
So, you've stayed silent while your wife was being treated like this?
Chris stiffened, fumbling with his words.
Well, Mom said Laura was a bad wife and needed discipline.
I see. So you agree that she's a bad wife?
Grace looked away from Chris as if she had nothing more to say to him. Chris's face turned ashen as he hung his head. Grace glanced around at Diane, Sarah, and Megan and spoke in a cold, cutting tone.
You're all absolutely despicable.
The relatives were silent, their faces drained of color. Grace stared intently at Diane, her gaze sharp and unyielding.
I understand doting on your son, but that doesn't make this behavior acceptable. If you think this is normal, then something is seriously wrong with you.
Well, there are circumstances.
Diane mumbled but was rendered speechless under Grace's piercing gaze.
What circumstances? Ridiculous. The only thing I've confirmed here is just how despicable you all are. I'm cutting off all financial support, so prepare yourselves.
What?
Their exclamations of shock filled the room. Since Chris's father, the head of the household, passed away, Diane's livelihood had largely depended on her survivor's benefits. Yet somehow, she indulged Sarah and Megan in luxury and hosted these extravagant steak dinners multiple times a year. The source of these funds was Grace, who had found success in the UK. Grace, who had a strained relationship with Diane, moved to the UK through connections after her husband's death. There, she struck gold by importing and selling American sweets, becoming a wealthy businesswoman. Now she leads a comfortable life, having delegated her business to subordinates and earning millions annually from stock dividends. Feeling pity for Diane, who was living modestly on survivors' benefits and a small inheritance, Grace had been sending her substantial financial support. But now, Grace was cutting off that support. Upon hearing this, Diane turned pale.
Wait, please. If you do that, I won't be able to make ends meet.
You should be able to manage just fine on your husband's insurance and survivor's benefits. And for the record, I didn't send money so you could serve premium steak to all your relatives.
Diane wasn't the only one panicking. Sarah and Megan were equally distressed.
If the financial support stops, we're in trouble. I've been using it to pay for my kids' extracurricular classes.
Same here. I was planning to rely on it to cover private school tuition after entrance exams.
Their shameless complaints were appalling, but Grace remained unfazed.
That's not my problem.
Sarah and Megan could only hang their heads in defeat. Finally, Grace turned to Chris.
I have no intention of employing a man who doesn't value his wife. You're fired, effective immediately.
Chris let out the loudest scream of all. You see, Chris worked at the American branch of a UK-based company where Grace owned the majority of the shares and was essentially the CEO. He earned a decent salary from the position.
I had planned to make you the head of the American branch someday as my grandson. But if you can't even protect your own wife, how could I trust you to manage employees? What a shame.
Grace said, though her expression showed no hint of regret.
Wait, please. I'll apologize. Just don't fire me.
As Chris blurted this out, Grace's face twisted into a terrifying expression.
The one you should apologize to isn't me, but Laura.
Grace shouted, her anger so overpowering that Chris collapsed onto the floor. At some point, someone had quietly moved the children to another room, leaving only the pale-faced adults behind. The smell of charred steak wafted up from the plate in front of me. It almost felt like it was begging to be eaten, so I took Chris's portion and helped myself to it. Delicious! The thought escaped my lips before I could stop myself. So, Chris enjoyed such a fantastic steak all this time while letting me endure everything. The bitterness of that realization hit me hard. They say the anger born of food-related grievances is the worst, and it felt like all my pent-up fury was ready to erupt. If Chris had stood up for me against Diane's bullying, things might have been different. But he hadn't. He had silently laughed along as Diane tormented me. Grace looked at me.
I'm so sorry for my foolish relatives. It's truly disgraceful to call them family. I don't know how I can make it up to you, but I'll do anything within my power.
In that case, could you hire me at the company in Chris's place? The words left my mouth before I had time to think. I've always been interested in working for an international company, but I never had the chance. Now that Chris is being fired, there'll be an opening, right? I half expected rejection, but Grace responded immediately.
Of course.
You've got to be kidding.
I don't go back on my word.
Well, okay. As long as Laura can take my place and earn the salary, I guess we'll manage.
Manage? You think we'll be fine on my income? That's ridiculous. I'm divorcing you. I'll be claiming alimony too. Whatever I'm entitled to. By the way, is it true you're involved with the bar owner? If so, I'll double the alimony.
What? How did you find out about that?
We don't have kids, so I doubt I'll get much. But I'll take everything I can. Grace's words woke me up. Honestly, I was planning to make this Christmas my last visit here anyway. So once we're divorced, I won't have to come back at all. Chris's face turned from pale to ghostly white. and I found it amusing. I turned to look at Diane, Sarah, and Megan. Well, as of today, I'm officially done being the daughter-in-law. I doubt we'll ever see each other again. Goodbye. I said this calmly, stood up, and began to leave.
Guess I'll head out too.
Grace said, standing as well. Diane, startled by Grace's movement, suddenly clung to me in desperation.
Wait, Laura. Please give me a chance to apologize. I'm really sorry. It was just a bit of jealousy. I promise I'll never do anything like this again. Please, forgive me. If you forgive me, I'm sure Grace will reconsider stopping the financial support.
As if I'd ever forgive you. Without raising my voice or smirking spitefully, I simply smiled faintly and replied in a monotone, robotic voice, my eyes devoid of light. This way of speaking instills far more fear in the other person. And it was incredibly effective. Diane let out a strange whimper and collapsed onto the floor. I glanced around and saw that Sarah and Megan were pale, the relatives were pale, and Chris was as white as a sheet. Well then, everyone, goodbye. I smiled and left the house.
I'm sorry, Laura. Regarding the divorce, I'll recommend an excellent lawyer.
Grace apologized repeatedly as she walked out with me. The lawyer she introduced was outstanding. I secured alimony and finalized the divorce. Chris resisted until the very end, but when I threatened to take it to court, he finally backed down. Apparently, he wasn't ready to face a courtroom battle. After being fired from his job, Chris spent some time job hunting, but being naturally incompetent, he couldn't find work, so Grace ended up stepping in to help him out. It's not as if finding a new job would have been easy for him. He apparently worked part-time for a while, but ended up becoming unemployed and retreating to his parents' house. Not long after, I started receiving a flood of calls from Diane, Sarah, and Megan. It seemed they had lost contact with Grace and wanted me to convince her to resume the financial support. Not my problem, idiots. When I said that, there was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I promptly hung up and blocked their numbers. If they try calling from another number, I'll consult my lawyer, but I doubt they have the nerve to do that. As for me, I'm thriving at my new job. It's a fresh start in an entirely new field. And while there's a lot to learn and it's challenging, it's nothing compared to the 5 years I spent being treated like a maid and bullied at Diane's house. Chris, as the grandson of the company's owner, apparently slacked off and did a half-hearted job. The employees, upon seeing my work ethic, were moved to tears and thanked me profusely. Having just finalized the divorce, I'm not thinking about remarriage yet, but when the time comes, I want to make sure I find someone who truly values their wife. I need to sharpen my judgment for that, right? With such thoughts running through my mind, I tackled today's work with energy and focus.